So we all know the story ends when the ring hits that lava. But what happens next is actually a brutal, massive geopolitical shift. Here is every major event after Lord of the Rings explained in order. On May 1st, 3019, Aragorn assumed the crown of King of Elessar inside the gates of Minas Tirith. On Midsummer's Day of that same year, he married Arwen Undómiel, uniting the long-severed royal bloodlines of Elves and Men into a single ruling house. The immediate domestic crisis required rebuilding the great gates of the city, which had been pulverized by the black steel battering ram Grond during the siege. Gimli imported a construction battalion of northern dwarves from Erebor, who smelted solid steel and raw mythril to forge an unbreakable city entrance. Legolas led a permanent colony of Silvan Elves into Ithilien, utilizing structural cultivation to clear out the leftover martial rot and replant the scorched southern woodlands. A royal decree followed, declaring the Druadan Forest strictly off-limits to outside settlers, granting the indigenous wild men total regional autonomy under their chief Ghân-buri-Ghân. Looking southward, Elessar ceded the fertile land surrounding the inland sea of Lake Nurnen to Sauron's thousands of liberated agricultural slaves, establishing a self-governing independent farming territory. When the calendar finally transitioned into the official start of the Fourth Age in 3021, Gondor's royal mint replaced all defaced enemy currencies with silver coinage bearing the emblem of the White Tree. To secure the northern frontier, the king expanded the borders of Arnor to encompass the settlement of Bree, while issuing a strict legal ban preventing any big folk from crossing into the Shire without direct hobbit permission. But this thriving human empire was about to watch 5 legendary figures board a white ship. On September 29, 3021, the final chapter of an era wrapped up at the Grey Havens when a white ship carried Frodo, Bilbo, Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel away from Middle-earth for good. Getting them safety to the coast at Mithlond was a serious operation, with Elrond's twin sons Elladan and Elrohir riding alongside Merry and Pippin as the heavy security detail for the trip. The reason everyone had to leave came down to a brutal reality of magic. When the One Ring went into the fire, the 3 elven rings, Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, completely lost their power. The invisible walls keeping places like Rivendell and Lorien safe from the decay of time just evaporated. Rivendell basically turned into a ghost town overnight as the remaining elves packed up and headed west, leaving Elrond's famous home to rot in the autumn rain. Down in the golden woods of Lothlorien, things went south even faster. The Malorn trees started dropping their leaves, and the whole place reverted back into a wild, empty forest. Galadriel's husband, Celeborn, actually tried to tough it out for a bit by creating a small, scaled-down settlement called East Lorien, but the crushing silence eventually got to him. After a few years of total isolation, he walked away from the dying woods, crashed with his grandsons back in the ruins of Rivendell for a while, and eventually caught his own boat across the sea. This left the entire northern wilderness completely empty of elven voices, handing the world over to mortal men. But this new, fragile peace was about to put a massive amount of political power directly into the hands of a hobbit back home. On May 1st, 3020, Sam Gamgee married Rosie Cotton and moved into Bag End, kicking off a massive shift in how he fits into the Shire. He opened that silver box Galadriel gave him and scattered the magical dirt all over the West Farthing to fix the orchard Saruman's thugs chopped down. A single Malorn sapling took root right in the party field, growing into the only blooming elven tree outside of Lothlorien and bringing in crowds just to see the golden flowers. This farming miracle basically made Sam a local hero, getting him elected Mayor of Mickle Delving in Shire Reckoning 1427. The gig actually combined the jobs of postmaster and first sheriff under one title, giving him major executive power over Hobbit society. Down south, King Aragorn took notice and made Sam, Merry, and Pippin official councillors of the Northern Kingdom. The Shire kept re-electing Sam for 6 straight 7-year terms, meaning he ran the place for 42 unbroken years. At home, his family grew to include 13 kids, and his oldest girl, Eleanor, even became a maid of honor to Queen Arwen. When Rosie died in Shire Reckoning 1482, Sam handed the Red Book over to Eleanor, walked out of the Shire, and vanished from Middle-earth history for good. While things were quiet in the Shire, the story was completely different down south, where things were turning incredibly violent. Once Aragorn got things under control inside Gondor, he immediately launched a brutal, decades-long military campaign to lock down the eastern and southern borders. Mordor's collapse had left a massive power vacuum, and leftover factions of Easterlings and Haradrim were trying to take advantage by raiding the frontiers. To shut this down, King Elessar teamed back up with King Eomer of Rohan, putting together a massive joint army of cavalry and infantry to hunt down hostile warlords around the Sea of Rhûn. Down south, Aragorn forced the fractured tribes of Harad to surrender and swear loyalty to his crown. He made their chieftains sign strict treaties requiring them to ship heavy annual tributes of horses, livestock, and raw gold straight to Minas Tirith. By building heavily fortified bases along the River Carnan and taking over the old naval ports in Umbar, the new kingdom set up a massive policed buffer zone. This gave humanity total military and economic dominance over the map. Internal peace was paid for with constant violence on the edges, turning the kingdom into a synchronized war machine that crushed any hint of rebellion. All that military power and land expansion still couldn't stop the thing that was about to completely break the Fellowship generation apart. In the year 120 of the Fourth Age, King Elessar reached his 210th year of life and recognized the approaching decay of his legendary Númenórean vitality. Exercising the ancient prerogative of his ancestors, he chose the exact moment of his passing, relinquishing his life voluntarily before losing his wits to old age. He handed the winged crown of Gondor and the scepter of Anúminas to his son Eldarion, walking into the silent street of the Rathdinnen to lie down upon a stone bed. Arwen Undómiel wept by his side, but the king remained resolute in his departure, entering a permanent sleep that shattered the final living anchor holding the original fellowship together on mortal soil. Legolas immediately retreated into the woodlands of Ithilien to construct a custom grey vessel using native timber. Gimli joined his companion at the riverbank, breaking all historical precedents by preparing to depart Middle-earth as the sole dwarf permitted to cross the sundering seas due to his deep bond with the elves. The two friends then boarded the craft, sailing down the waters of the Anduin past the ruined monuments of old kingdoms before navigating through the Bay of Belfast and disappearing entirely beyond the western horizon. Their departure left the continent utterly devoid of its mythic protectors, reducing the world into a quiet domain governed strictly by ordinary laws of nature. The ancient languages faded into forgotten folklore, ensuring that the epic struggles against darkness dissolved into the quiet, unrecorded history of a completely human world. Then, it was time for the hardest, loneliest goodbye of the entire story. Following the voluntary passing of King Elessar, Arwen Undómiel felt the bitter reality of her mortality settle heavily into her veins. The cold splendor of the evening star faded completely, leaving her utterly alone in Minas Tirith as the festive sounds of Eldarion's coronation echoed through the lower circles of the city. She said farewell to her children and her people, turning away from the White Tower to embark on a solitary journey back to the deserted valley of Rivendell. Finding the house of Elrond vacant and weathering under grey skies, she continued westward into the silent, unmapped borders of the Lothlorien proper. The golden malern trees had entirely shed their leaves, transforming the once vibrant elven sanctuary into a dark, decaying wilderness where no voices answered her calls. Arwen walked alone through the fading woods until she reached Cairn Amroth, the exact green mound where she and Aragorn had sworn their vows of fidelity under the summer stars centuries earlier. When the winter winds began to strip the remaining branches bare, she laid herself down upon the cold stone to die a lonely, mortal death. Her passing marked the definitive end of the firstborn generation on the mainland, sealing the transition of Middle-earth into a mundane era defined solely by the short-lived kingdoms of men. She was buried beneath the fading grass, where her resting place remained entirely forgotten by history as the world moved onward into the modern age.